Today on Isolation Nation, one of my favorite guys on the planet. Love this guy, dear friend Kelly Hrudey.
What did you say?
Dear friend Kelly Hrudey?
Did I hear an H?
Yeah. Why wouldn't you hear an H? HRUDEY. Kelly Hrudey.
It's not Hrudey. Don't say the H. It's silent.
Since when? What the hell's going on? Or maybe I should say what the L's going on. All right, take two in 3, 2, 1. Today on Isolation Nation. I'm sorry, this is really throwing me off. Silent H?
Yeah, and it's rude to mispronounce a guest's name.
I see what you did there. It's Hrudey. All right, take number 3. All right, I got this. Take 3. Today, it's a pleasure to honor one of the most honorable men around. The hour has come to pay homage to the great Kelly Hrudey.
Oh,
I nailed that.
No.
I nailed that, right?
No, you didn't.
I didn't?
It's homage.
You're kidding, right? Oh, my God. I need a drink.
Okay, what do you want?
Some 2-0? Ah, get it?
Oh,
2-0?
God.
I dropped the H. It was silent. Hey, let's check out and see what's on BO. HBO?
Are you done?
Or maybe go for a drive in the OV lanes with our haute couture. Yeah, I'm done. Today on Isolation Nation. Hey, see what my shirt says? Fight for your... You get the idea.
Yeah.
All right, let's get Kelly in because he's smiling and laughing. I mean, I was so worried that you would be greatly offended by that and go, you're making fun of my name. Now, Kelly Hrudey, I mean, obviously I know that there's no H in front of your name, but I'm sure early in your career, you must have heard all the time, ladies and gentlemen, starting in goal, Kelly Hrudey.
Well, to that point, Michael, I think I just sort of changed it to Rudy when I was going through my midget years and junior and so on, because people were having such a difficult time pronouncing my name. But if you were to ask my dad, in fact, he would say it's Hrudey. And so you're correct in how you pronounce it. I know you're having a little bit of fun. It's funny. I went to the Czech Republic a couple times, once for a family holiday and once for a work trip. And they nailed it. I was checking into the hotel and they're like, hello, Mr. Hrudey. Thanks for being a loyalty member or something like that. I was like, that's pretty cool. So I just did it for the convenience so that the people here in North America wouldn't struggle mightily trying to get my name correct.
Okay, so excuse me if I say this. Case, it's Hrudey, actually, if you really want to know, okay? Good to see you, man. How are you?
Yes, we're doing really well. We're hanging in there. I say really well loosely, as you know, everybody's going through a lot of the similar things, my family included. But today it's a good day because I'm actually wearing pants, not the joggers that I've been wearing for the last 6 weeks like everybody else. I have a real shirt on, not a sweatshirt that I've been washing every week or so, but throwing it on every single day, it seems. So yeah, we're doing okay. Thanks for asking. And yourself?
Yeah, you know what? I'm doing well, and I think that you and I were talking before, and let me tell people that as you would expect, since I was kind of having fun with his name, that obviously you and I are friends. I know your family. You and I really bonded over the whole mental health thing. I heard your daughter speak at an event that was Mike Babcock's event, and I thought I was stunned by how important her message was, how relevant her message was, and I just, I love the Hrudey. So good to see you, man.
Same. And your work that night in Saskatoon was awesome. I followed not only your career when you started, and I loved your great work and so on, but the biggest impact you've had on so many people's lives is Bell Let's Talk. And every single year when it comes up or I see shows like this that you're involved in, it just warms my heart because I know what the impact you've had on people, and I know how big your heart is. I've got a cool friend in Toronto, and he taught me a lot about how you come across and whether you want to approach things with a black heart or a red heart. And it's always best to come at everything with a red heart, because it's all about love then, right? And, it's such a,
Thanks.
I just love talking about this topic because it's so near and dear to us. And I find it so heartwarming when people share their stories.
Right. And I felt the same way, obviously, with Caitlin and with you. And I know that day you must have been, beaming as any parent would. So tell me how Caitlin's doing. And I would never have brought up her name if she wasn't publicly, a person that, has looked into the camera, looked at an audience and said, I suffer from very severe anxiety at times. This would, I would think, be a tough time for her as it is for many.
And OCD. So for the people out there that don't know Caitlin's story, in 2013, she came out publicly and shared her story. When she was 11 or 12 years old, so that's many years ago now, she's 27, she started having what we thought exhibiting these quirky little habits, but they weren't quirky little habits. We just didn't put them all together. Had we done that, we would have been able to get her a little bit of help a little bit sooner. But I think this is an important message out there. I don't beat myself up about that, Michael, because we didn't know to be on the lookout for trouble. We didn't know trouble was lurking. And so if you're out there and you're watching your family or friends and you have maybe an inkling something's going on, maybe ask a couple questions and then you might be able to get them some help a little bit quicker. But anyways, Kate's doing really well, and she doesn't mind sharing about what her thoughts are. Her thoughts are always every single day about dying and diseases. And so you can imagine our stress level went up with this pandemic, and how will she be able to handle this? Will this trigger something again? Will she have to dig herself out of a ditch, so to speak, about what her brain's going to tell her in that loop that just goes round and round and round? And I thought this was going to be a troubling time for her, yet she's handled it really, really well. In fact, in the next week or so, Michael, on my social media, Twitter and Instagram, I'm going to have a sit down with her and ask her some of those questions about how are you able to manage this when just the sheer thoughts that you have every day and what we're living with this pandemic, it must be so difficult.
It's so empowering for others, because not every person can impact every other person. Like your daughter, given her age, given her gender, given her struggles, there's people that would look at her and hear her story and go, oh my God, I can talk about it because I heard her talking about it. And well, she's not ashamed and she's not embarrassed and she doesn't sound weak. And that is so impactful and so important. And it's like, I refer to it this way: the worst thing in my life has been depression. But when I feel good and I get to share it with people, it becomes one of the best things in my life. And it's empowering to take the worst thing and pay it back. It's like I kind of look at it like I'm paying depression back by trying to make a difference in other people with my story.
Well, mental health and the different issues, depression, OCD, anxiety, and others, it's a bully, and it wants to ruin good people. And that's how I always describe OCD about what Caitlin's gone through. It's a bully, and it wants to ruin her, and she's had to become extremely tough and fight this. I've said this many, many times to Caitlin. I think she is the strongest person I've ever met. You've gone through the same thing. I'm sure many people tell you about your strength and how it's impacted them. So anybody that ever shares their story is I've got all the respect for in the world.
It's so bizarre, though, that you look at your daughter and others who have mental health battles, and they talk about them publicly. Not only do you not look at that as a weakness, you look at that as a strength, yet the stigma is based on this concept.
Right.
That mental illness is a weakness, that it's not like diabetes or cancer or lupus, that somehow it's like a hybrid illness. It's like people go, hey, I know she can't help it, for instance, but come on, it's not like she has cancer, but come on, it's not like she can't, like suck it up a bit and get on with her life. And it's bizarre that you see that as strength in her, where a lot of people for themselves see it as a weakness.
I just love, Michael, how we can have these conversations and feel comfortable about it, and how all of us in our own little circles are doing as much as we can to get the message out that it's okay to talk about it. And I know you had my good friend W. Brett Wilson on the show a while ago, and he shared his story. And Brett and I have done a number of different events every year about mental health and trying to raise awareness and money. And I just think, it's so, like, I love the word heartwarming. I said it once already, but I'm beaming when we have these conversations, because it's helping somebody, and they're thinking, hey, there's that Hrudey guy. He's from the hockey world. I bet he can't talk about his feelings or some of his family members and the difficulties they've had with mental health. And yeah, we can, and we're proud of it.
Here's a question for you. Speaking of that, this is from, I think, Facebook. Were your headbands really made from underwear, as Gretzky mentioned recently on Hockey Night in Canada?
Yes, but not the underwear you're maybe thinking about. It's the blue T-shirts, the underwear we used to wear underneath our equipment. And I think those were Stanfield. They're basically pajamas. And so what I did was I was trying to find a more absorbent headband than just a regular cotton one that I wore early on in my days with New York, because I wore contacts and I always had long hair and just the sweat in my eyes. So I tried to find something one day at practice. I just took that blue T-shirt, which we called underwear, ripped it up, put a bandana on my head, and lo and behold, I found it more absorbent. So I just stuck with it. It sort of became a trademark of which I hated the last few years of my life playing in the NHL, Michael, but I was convinced by my family to keep wearing it.
Underwear, eh? Okay. That's not a shock to Robert Paris. He is our other guest today. He is a professional. When I say it's not a shock, because he's wearing a Habs jersey, right? And he said to me, "Oh, Michael, I better not mention 1993 because the Habs beat the Canadiens to win the Stanley Cup and Kelly Hrudey was in goal." And I said, "You know what? I think he's probably put it to rest." Robert, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on the show. And as I told you before, I have such tremendous respect for what you're doing, Michael, and for all of you, Kelly, your daughter, Michael, for coming out and telling your stories. I think that's so critically important.
I noticed you deflected, though. It was about the jersey and how you were worried that you were going to offend Kelly. But when you mentioned it before we came on, Kelly, you said you still can't watch a replay of 1993.
I can't. Even game one, in which we played really well and we won 4-1, and it's just a series that's too painful for me to watch. Now, you would think if you get all the way to the Stanley Cup final, it would be in some way a pleasant memory, and yet it's my worst hockey memory. Robert, by the way, I don't take offense that you're a Habs fan and wearing the jersey. It's just, for me, it's too painful, and as you can imagine, I guess I still haven't gotten over the fact that we lost.
Wow,
and please, Kelly, again, being a Habs fan for the last 26, 27 years, I'm on with my jersey. Which obviously I don't have a bag over my head, so please forgive me if I go back to 1993. That's the last great memory we have, and for 27 years we've been holding on to that. So please excuse me.
You're all good. No need to apologize. Listen, it's a great memory for many, many people, and there are about 40 people that can't stand that experience, and that's my teammates and my coaching staff and managers and other team staff. But other than that, I totally understand that it's a great memory for many Canadians.
Right. So let me mention this. This came on Twitter, and it says, "Hey, Kelly, you lucky bastard for beating the Toronto Maple Leafs. I cannot believe you guys won Game 7. Such cheap goals. Dave Ellett knocking one in with his skate. The Leafs were a better team than you. No question about it. The Leafs would have beaten the Montreal Canadiens. So you can suck it." I just made that up, by the way.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah,
it's actually pretty funny to me when I'm in downtown Toronto and the Leafs fans come up to me and they say how much they hated me. I'm like, that's a compliment, bud. Like,
of course,
right? I like that.
So you can hang out for a while, right? Because I want to talk to Robert about getting his advice, which you can consider, take it and do with it what you want. Let's find out. Robert, you mentioned to me in the letter before we came on, you said, hey, just so you know, I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a psychiatrist. What do you call yourself then? What does it say on your business card?
Basically, what I do is I develop leaders. I've been in business for 30 years, and around 7 or 8 years ago, I got involved in a field called neuro leadership. And what we do there is we teach people how their brains work, and we teach them the concept that very often your brain controls you. And so in neuro leadership, what we try to do is help people take control of their brains, tell their authentic stories, and use that as a means of better leading themselves and others.
Okay, so I'm just telling Phil this. We're going to change a little bit of the order here. I want to roll the Back to the Future, because I know that you say that it's all about destiny. It's all about understanding your destiny, and that brought to mind this clip. Roll it, Phil.
Yes, I'm George McFly. I'm your density. I mean, your destiny.
So I know destiny is a key word for you in how you approach life and how you help people. Tell us why.
Well, the truth of the matter is your belief system is your destiny. And I think the interesting thing, I mentioned this field called neuro leadership. There's actually been tremendous research. There's a doctor by the name of Dr. Bruce Lipton who wrote a book called The Biology of the Belief. And what we've learned is that our body actually has 50 trillion cells. And what happens when we have reinforced beliefs that are hidden in our brain is that the brain, through a neural mechanism, sends messages down to each of the 50 trillion cells that actually affects the health of each individual cell. So if we engage in constant negative belief systems, and I think that's the fear that we have during this pandemic, that with the stress and anxiety, day after day after day, we're being exposed to this negativity, and our beliefs are negative. So that, again, is being absorbed by the brain, communicated to the rest of the body, and that means that leaves us more prone for mental and physical health issues moving forward.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is that if whatever you believe is your destiny, right?
There's absolutely no question about it, which is why it's so important, again, that we take control of our brain and we take control of our belief system as a tremendous means of, again, improving our mental and physical health.
Given all of this and the fact that most of us have more time on our hands, perhaps, than we've ever had. I mean, some people have nothing but time. What can people do to address what you just said? Because first of all, this is a time of great stress and anxiety. But second of all, this is a time of a lot of freedom for a lot of people in finding other things to do.
Well, that's a great question, and there's two parts to that, Michael. And the first one I want to say is to engage in positive thinking. Right? We've had motivational speakers throughout the decades who have been telling us that, and they've actually been bang on. The more we engage in positive thinking, again, that becomes embedded into the brain, gets translated to the rest of the body in the 50 trillion cells, and that can only lead to positive mental and physical health. However, the other thing that we've learned as well is just engaging in positive thinking isn't enough. Because if we say, for example, that, the future is wonderful, that everything is going to be great, I'm really optimistic about it, but our hidden story is telling us, no, I'm a loser. The actual, I know things are going to turn out bad. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my business. My loved ones are going to be sick. That overrides that positive messaging, right? So it's not just enough to engage in positive thinking.
You sound like a Canadian Tony Robbins. And I mentioned that because Kelly Hrudey, do I remember correctly, Tony Robbins in your dressing room back in the day?
Even better than that, Michael. By the way, Robert, I was listening in on what you were talking about, and I agree 100% because everything that I do, whether it was when I was a player and or a broadcaster, I remind myself about positivity. And even before every single show, I've been a broadcaster now full-time for 21 years, and before every show, whether it's a hockey night in Canada, Sportsnet, and or a Flames regional game, I remind myself about, I've done this before, you're good at your job, and I always enter every broadcast with something positive in my head. Now, getting back to your question, Michael, yes, I was in a ditch in a bad way in 1992-93 season, the year in which we did go to the finals, but I was in a slump for a full 2 months. And luckily for me, I had a really caring coach, Barry Melrose. He went way out on a limb because sports psychology wasn't really around. I don't think there are many people that believed in or knew much about the mental health of a young hockey player. And Barry introduced me to Tony Robbins. So I worked one-on-one with Tony, which was a game changer for me. We ended up going to the finals that year. I played another 5 years in the league, which had nobody got or looked after me, my career would have been done. I would have been so done that, and I was really reeling. In fact, I talk about this whole episode in my book because I had never really shared it with anybody. You know, we've talked about Caitlin, but I went through a real ugly stretch, and I had an episode, I'm going to call it, in Milwaukee, where my brain was just giving me the most confusing thoughts. And somehow, only because of Barry and Tony, I was able to get out of it.
Okay, so you love Barry Melrose, but and this is tongue in cheek, obviously. Would you not have loved to have seen Pat Burns and Barry Melrose actually decide it between the benches when Burns tried to get there? I mean, that I still, you know, the late Pat Burns. We're never going to see the rematch of that.
Right, I know there's some real weird things. Forget about the outcome of this whole series, just how it was. Those two guys were going at it, and I didn't really know what was going on, by the way. And you know, there are other things. There was, first of all, for about the first 54 minutes of that series, there was no hatred. We were just coming off a big victory over Vancouver, and we weren't really into the series yet, and they had just beaten St. Louis. And all of a sudden, Doug Gilmour, their best player, is coming across the blue line, and he's caught in the tracks, and Marty nails him, and then Wendell Clark steps in. And I think personally that's when the bad blood between Burns and Melrose took over, and they took the series personally, which is good for hockey, because when there's hatred, then we as fans, we're the beneficiaries. You
know, when you see that, you lean forward. And obviously, I knew what you were going to say with, and you mentioned Marty. You're talking about Marty McSorley, obviously. Yeah. Robert, by the way, just to confirm for people, because I promoted the show, I said, you know, former Boston Celtic great and Hall of Famer Robert Parrish is going to join us. Just to confirm, you are not the former Boston Celtic Robert Parrish, correct?
Well, very often I've been confused. Maybe
I can see that. I can see that. And, you know, this is bizarre, sort of the 6 degrees of separation between all of us. And, you were talking, and then I, mentioned Tony Robbins. And the fact is, you have a jersey on. Can you turn around? I don't know if you have headphones that are in that will allow you to do it, but that is number 44 of the Montreal Canadiens. And
yes,
that is...
allow me to do that. So
That is Stéphane Richet's jersey. And as I was saying before, that Stéphane Richet changed my life, because one day on Off the Record, I never met him before. I said, hey, Stéphane, this was 2009. Would it be okay if I asked you how you're doing with your depression? Because I know you suffered back in the 80s and the 90s. And he said, it's very painful for me. And I said, okay, well, I certainly don't want to cause you pain, but if you'll talk about it, I'll share my story. Maybe that will help you. And he goes, what do you mean? So I told him my story. He said, okay, let's go on the air. We talked for maybe 90 seconds. And his story was so compelling about winning the Stanley Cup and not getting any joy out of it. And then I thought, that was interesting. Didn't give it a second thought. The next day, start getting emails, 22 of them, almost all of them from men, and almost all of them saying essentially it was the first time in their life they've seen 2 men talking about mental illness without seeming ashamed or embarrassed. And because of that, they were sharing with me. So Stéphane Richet, for me, changed the course of of my life. I mean, here we are having this conversation on this show, which we would never have had if not for Stefan Richer and his willingness to share.
Well, I think that's absolutely awesome. And I think what we're talking about there is the fact that Stefan Richer shared his story. Michael, you're sharing your story. Same thing with you, Kelly, and your daughter. And I think that's and that's kind of the second thing. It's not just positive thinking, but the power of getting in touch with your hidden story and being able to tell it. Because the reality is we all have, if we go back to childhood, when we were 4, 5, 6 years of age, and the brain's all about survival. And as a 4, 5, or 6-year-old, you're totally dependent on your parents for survival. And they often don't have the best parenting techniques as well. So you may have been abandoned, or they may have made you feel really stupid. So that message of I'm not good enough or I'm stupid gets encoded in the brain, along with coping mechanisms we used at the time to help us. So somebody at 4 or 5 or 6 years old going into adolescent years, the coping mechanism may have been bullying, right? So that is the way that the brain uses to help that individual survive. So when that hidden story of I'm not good enough, combined with the coping mechanism of I'm going to be a bully, that's encoded in the brain, gets into adulthood, and that person might become a bully in the workplace or with others as well, which is why getting in touch with that hidden story is critical in terms of shaping your belief systems.
Now, this is going to sound like a weird, perhaps inappropriate joke, but do you have a rattlesnake on your lap?
I don't.
Because there's this sound. It sounds like a rattlesnake. And I figured the best way to use that was to mention the lap because, of course, we're men and we make penis jokes all the time. But there's a rattling noise as you speak. Let me hear again.
Yes,
it's
I'm
back.
not sure. Yeah,
it's back. The noise is back. Let's see if we can fix that, Kelly. Thank you for doing this. You guys should hold on because tomorrow on the show we have a comedian. His name is Alonzo Bowden, and he is he's actually he's an A-list comedian in the United States. Let's roll the tape because speaking of A-list comedians, there is a guy named Sean Cullen who's kind of a Canadian treasure. And this Canadian treasure, Sean Cullen, we're rolling the longer one, Phil, is more than willing to help with mental health and to talk about it. So he has actually prepared a song for us, which we can listen to at this point because he's promoting Alonzo Bowden and his appearance on tomorrow's show. And if it sounds like I'm kind of filling for time, for God's sake, Phil, I'm filling for time here. Can we roll the tape? There we go. Hey, John, thank you. I'm going to make it sound like he's actually just joining us. Sean, Alonzo Bowden, I know you know the guy who's going to be on the show tomorrow. And you know what?
Alonzo Bowden is on the show. He won last comic stand, and don't you know? He's a good guy. He wouldn't kid me. He once gave his brother a kidney. Euthanasia in isolation. Such a difficult situation. It's a nation.
Whoa.
I'm really into.
No. I knew where that was going. Oh, thank God we cut it before that. Okay, let's see. Doc, let me hear. Talk to me.
Yes. Is that a little better now?
No, it's no good. So I'm just going to dismiss you. But say to you, hold on, because I'd love to talk to you afterwards. Your advice was actually really amazing. I read a book years ago, The Power of Positive Thinking, and it was all about, Kelly, you were talking about before broadcast. My thing was always that I would close my eyes on the set, especially early in my career before a live show, and I would imagine myself doing the show. I would be thinking, okay, I can hear myself saying hello and welcome to Sports Desk, which is what it was at the time. You know, I'm Michael Landsberg, and I would imagine myself, and I would imagine people who were watching going, wow, you know, this guy's really on his game or whatever. And I would sort of live this positive experience. And I thought that was a huge advantage for me.
Man, how we get through days or situations or circumstances, right? So I'll give you a little tidbit. Every single night I'm on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturdays and or during the playoffs when we're on nightly, while the theme music is playing. And so all the viewers back home are watching the montage, the opening, and listening to the music. I'm giving myself a pep talk, and I'm talking about in my head, right? You've done this so many times. You're good at it. I just reinforce, all those things. I don't like going into a show thinking, oh boy, I hope I have a good show, just sort of hoping things are going to turn out. I feed myself all sorts of information that makes my brain feel really good and gets me off to what I hope is always going to be a good start.
I remember reading these words. It was a book I read just before I started in television, and it said, "You are as you see yourself," which is pretty close to exactly what the doctor was saying. And there's a book called Think and Grow Rich, which also was built on the concept of the power of positive thinking. So we're certainly aligned on that. And your positive thinking seems to be working because you're awesome on Hockey Night on, I can't believe I'm going to say this word, Sportsnet. Oh, God. I'd be better off saying the C word. C, of course, being for Casey, my daughter, right? I'm glad that your family's good. Please say hi for me. And hey, if you guys are doing a show next week, you and Caitlin, let me know about it so I can talk about it. And I would love to have Caitlin on this show because her story is so important.
That'd be awesome. She would really appreciate that. And yeah, that's awesome, Michael. I cherish our friendship, and I'm glad you invited me on today. Thank you.
Thanks for doing it. And Robert, I know I can see you. You're back. Let's hear how you sound. You there, Robert? Okay. Well, at least there's no rattlesnake noise. That's a good thing.
Am I on right now?
Yes. Yes. I can hear you a little bit better. So you've worked your way back. Your microphone's working okay. Just in time for me to say thank you so much for doing this. This was a pleasure and very beneficial and very useful.
Thank you very much, Michael. And again, thank you for the work that you're doing. As I told you before, I'm a very big fan, and I know that this work is reaching a lot of people. Highly inspiring.
Thanks for saying that. Okay, I have a question here that my daughter keeps pointing to it that it's for you. So what's your advice about sharing personal depression/anxiety experiences as a leader with direct reports? I am a manager on a corporate team. Is it appropriate?
Well, I can tell you it's a great question, and I think it's appropriate to the degree that you're comfortable doing it. But I can tell you the state of the art of leadership now is what we call daring and authentic leadership. And in fact, we don't tend to follow people who we perceive as being fake, that they're telling fake stories that we're really not into. We follow people who are being authentic, who tell their stories, who are human, who admit mistakes, who admit that they don't know it all. So it's a great part of the work. I've worked with a lot of executives when it comes to that. And even in group settings with executive teams, when they tell their story, the impact on other people is profound. They feel liberated by it. And I think it's a leadership requirement that we all get in touch with, tell our stories, and share them, just as like you're doing. I think, again, in the year 2020, that's a leadership necessity.
Thanks for doing this. How do people find out more? And, companies when companies go back to business and they're looking for the kind of advice that you've just given us, where can they get it?
Well, I have a website. It's called myelinleadership.com, and that's MYELIN leadership.com. I've got a lot of material there as well as contact information.
Thanks, man. By the way, that name does not really sort of flow off the lip. Where's that from? Myelin.
Okay, well, it's interesting because myelin is the substance in the brain. When you're actually wiring your brain, you're building myelin. So that's the substance in the brain. Who knew? So that makes sense. Thanks, man. Thanks to Kelly, and thanks to Casey, and thanks to Phil, and thanks to Mark, and thanks to Corey, and thanks to Kim. Did I miss anyone there? You know what? If I miss them, screw them. We'll do it tomorrow. This show is a matter of pride for so many of us, a matter of love, and just wanting to do something that is both informative,
but also fun, which I clearly had today. And as we leave you, we'll show you, why sometimes it's tough to do a show like this with your dogs around. We'll see you tomorrow on Isolation Nation. Whoa. Looked like you were kind of moving that when you start. Here we go. Take number 3 in 3, 2, 1. Okay.
Guys, don't eat the sheets. They're ripping it up to shreds.
Oh, so now he's got my glasses. There's the script. What is that? You're being HRUDEY.
So guilty.
Now Carl wants in too.